Today on It's the Bard Knox Life, we're getting into Chapter 2 of the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Chapter 2 will be what Lucy found there. Just reminding you all, we last left Lucy right as she met up with this faun that she found in the forest. This goat man. So we're going to pick up right from there. "Good evening," said Lucy. But the faun was so busy picking up its parcels that at first it did not reply. When it had finished, it made her a little bow. Good evening, said the faun. Excuse me, I don't want to be inquisitive, but should I be right in thinking that you are a daughter of Eve? My name's Lucy, she said, not quite understanding him. But you are, forgive me, you are what they call a girl. You are, of course I'm a girl, said Lucy. You are, in fact, human? Of course I'm human, said Lucy, still a little puzzled. To be sure, said the faun. How stupid of me. I've never seen a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve before. I am delighted. That is to say... Then it stopped, as if it was going to say something it had not intended, but had remembered in time. Delighted, it went on. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tumnus. I'm very pleased to meet you, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. And may I ask, Lucy, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumnus, how you have come to live in Narnia? Narnia? What's that? Said Lucy. This is the land of Narnia, said the faun. Where we are now, all that lies from the Lampost to the great castle of Carparavel on the eastern sea. And you have come from the wild woods of the west? I got in through the wardrobe in the spare room, said Lucy. Ah, said Mr. Tumnus in a rather melancholy voice. If only I had worked harder at my geography when I was a little faun. I should no doubt know about all these strange countries. It is too late now. Anyone else feel that? Not me so much. I do research a lot, but I totally get, feeling like you don't know where anything came from. The funny thing is, Tumnus doesn't realize she's from another dimension. So, continuing on here. But they aren't countries at all, said Lucy, almost laughing. It's only just back there. At least, I'm not sure. It's summer there. Meanwhile, said Mr. Tumnus, it is winter in Narnia and has been for ever so long, and we both shall catch cold if we stand here talking in the snow. Daughter of Eve from the far land of Spare where the eternal summer reigns around the bright city of Wardrobe, how would it be if you came and had tea with me? I think this is far more interesting of a choice that Lewis made than just a one-off joke. This immediately makes you feel more comfortable with him because you feel like he's stupid. This is one of those moves where you are immediately endearing the readers to someone without them realizing it. He made a comment that you may not think he's a dunce, but you realize he doesn't understand the gravity of the situation like you as an adult do. And if you're a kid, at least he's funny, right? Like, you can trust a funny person, right? Wink, wink. Thank you very much, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. But I was wondering whether I ought to be getting back. It's only just around the corner, said the faun. There'll be a roaring fire and toast and sardines and cake. Well, it's very kind of you, said Lucy, but I shan't be able to stay long. If you will take my arm, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumnus, I shall be able to hold the umbrella over both of us. That's the way, now off we go. And so Lucy found herself walking through the wood, arm in arm with this strange creature as if they had known each other all their lives. They had not gone far before they had came to the place where the ground became rough, and there were rocks all about, and little hills up and little hills down. At the bottom of one small valley, Mr. Tumnus turned suddenly aside, as if he were going to walk straight into an unusually large rock. But at the last moment, Lucy found he was leading her into the entrance of a cave. I love the way Lewis describes uh, landscape. He doesn't skimp on details, but he encourages you to fill them in. And he gives you the basics. If someone was just conversationally like describing a landscape, that's what he does. He doesn't try to paint the picture with words. He conversationally explains it to you, and you can imagine it yourself and fill it in from your own experience. I really like that, especially for children's literature, which this, of course, is children's literature for adults. So anyway, it's for both, but you understand what I'm saying. Oh, let's see. Large rock. But at the last moment, Lucy found he was leading her into the entrance of a cave. As soon as they were inside, she found herself blinking in the light of a wood fire. Then Tumnus stooped and took a flaming piece of wood out of the fire with a neat little pair of tongs and lit a lamp. "Now we shan't be long," he said, and immediately put a kettle on. Lucy thought she had never been in a nicer place. It was a little, dry, clean cave of reddish stone, with a carpet on the floor and two little chairs. "One for me and one for a friend," said Mr. Tumnus, "and a table and a dresser and a mantelpiece over the fire, and above that picture of a picture of an old faun with a gray beard. In one corner there was a door which Lucy thought must have led to Mr. Tumnus's bedroom, and on one wall was a shelf full of books. Lucy looked at these while he was setting out the tea things. They had titles like The Life and Letters of Silenus, or Nymphs and Their Ways, or Men, Monks, and Gamekeepers, A Study in Popular Legend, or Is Man a Myth? I love the joke, Is Man a Myth? It's such a goofy little reversal and a little wink from Lewis and all of his philosophy. "No, daughter of Eve," said the faun. And really, it was a wonderful tea. There was a nice brown egg lightly boiled for each of them, and then sardines on toast, and then buttered toast, and then toast with honey, and then a sugar-topped cake. And when Lucy was tired of eating, the faun began to talk. That's another thing about the Narnia books. A lot of people call them the walking and eating books. Walk and eat, walk and eat. There's a lot of food that is brought up. And I really think he uses the food to his advantage, because it not only does it make the reader salivate and enjoy the story, it really kind of sets a taste and a tone for what we're going for. We've got brown, the nice brown egg. These are country eggs. These are rural eggs. They're very and they're lightly boiled. They're just a nice little light bit of protein. And then we get sardines on toast, salty, very homey British kind of thing. And then buttered toast with honey. We're doing a lot of toast here, right? Delicious bread, but the toppings are really what make it nice. And then a sugar-topped cake. This is comfort food. This is something that I'm sure he wasn't just, spoiler alert, we get a little further in and he's lulling her to sleep with a song. I think this was part of the plan too. He was feeding her comfort food. This is a place where the betrayal that is coming is so much more evil and so much more startling and stark when it is happening in a place that feels so homely and calm. We're in the middle of winter and there's a roaring fire and you're just sitting in this beautiful cave. It's comfy, it's close, it's dark and dim, and just really, I love the way he just paints the feeling of this and then rips the rug out from under you in just a few moments. And when Lucy was tired of eating, the faun began to talk. He had wonderful tales to tell of life in the forest. He told about the midnight dances and how the nymphs who lived in the wells and the dryads who lived in the trees came out to dance with the fauns, about long hunting parties after the milk-white stag who could give you wishes if you caught him, about feasting and treasure-seeking in the wild red dwarfs, with the wild red dwarfs in deep mines and caverns far beneath the forest floor, and then about summer when the woods were green and old Silenus on his fat donkey would come to visit them, and sometimes Bacchus himself. And then the streams would run with wine instead of water, and the whole forest would give itself up to jollification for weeks on end. Just a very short note. Anytime Lewis mentions the dwarves, they're always living under the forest. They don't live in the mountains, like in Tolkien's stuff, and that kind of leads me more toward gnomes. I've always thought of the Narnian dwarves more as gnomes. That sort of a thing, more fairy related and sprite like in some ways, but kind of gnomes. So that's a whole other thing to get into later when we get into the dwarfs. Let's see here. And then about summer in the woods. Oh, yep, we did that. Jollification for weeks on end. Not that it isn't always winter now, he added gloomily. Then, to cheer himself up, he took out from its case on the dresser a strange little flute that looked as if it were made of straw, and began to play. And the tune he played made Lucy want to cry and laugh and dance and go to sleep all at the same time. It must have been hours later when she shook herself and said, "Oh, Mr. Tumnus, I'm so sorry to stop you, and I do love that tune, but really, I must go home. I only meant to stay for a few minutes." "It's no good now, said the fawn, laying down its flute and shaking its head at her very sorrowfully. "No good?" said Lucy, jumping up and feeling rather frightened. "What do you mean? I've got to go home at once. The others will be wondering what has happened to me." But a moment later she asked, "Mr. Tumnus, whatever is the matter?" For the fawn's brown eyes had filled with tears, and then the tears began trickling down its cheeks, and soon they were running off the end of its nose, and at last it covered its face with its hands and began to howl. "Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy in great distress. Don't! What is the matter? Aren't you well? Dear Mr. Tumnus, do tell me what is wrong." But the fawn continued sobbing, as if its heart would break. And even when Lucy went over and put her arms round him and lent him her handkerchief, he did not stop. He merely took the handkerchief and kept on using it, wringing it out with both hands whenever it got too wet to be of any more use, so that presently Lucy was standing in a damp patch. "Do stop it, Mr. Tumnus," bawled Lucy in his ear, shaking him. Do stop it at once. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, a great big fawn like you. What on earth are you crying about?" "Oh," sobbed Mr. Tumnus. I'm crying because I'm such a bad fawn." "I don't think you're a bad fawn at all," said Lucy. "I think you're a very good fawn. You're the nicest fawn I've ever met." "Oh, you couldn't be saying that if you knew," replied Mr. Tumnus between sobs. "No, I'm a bad fawn. I don't suppose there ever has been a worse fawn since the beginning of the world." "But what have you done?" asked Lucy. My old father now," said Mr. Tumnus. "That's his picture over the mantelpiece. He would never have done a thing like this." "A thing like what?" said Lucy. "Like what I've done," said the fawn. "Taken service under the White Witch. That's what I am. I'm in the pay of the White Witch." "The White Witch? Who is she?" "Why, it is she that has got all Narnia under her thumb. It's she that makes it always winter and never Christmas. Think of that." "How awful," said Lucy. "But what does she pay you for?" "That's the worst of it," said Mr. Tumnus with a deep groan. "I'm a kidnapper for her. That's what I am. Look at me, Daughter of Eve. Would you believe that I'm the sort of fawn to meet a poor, innocent child in the wood, one that has never done me any harm, and pretend to be friendly with it and invite it home to my cave, all for the sake of lulling it to sleep and then handing it over to the White Witch? No, said Lucy. I'm sure you wouldn't do anything of the sort. But I have, said the Faun. Well, said Lucy rather slowly, for she wanted to be truthful and not yet be too hard on him. Well, that was pretty bad. But you're so sorry for it. I'm sure you'll never do it again. Daughter of Eve, don't you understand? Said the Faun. It isn't something I have done. It's something I'm doing it this very moment. What do you mean? Cried Lucy, turning very white. You are the child, said Tumnus. I had orders from the White Witch that if ever I saw a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve in the wood, I was to catch them and hand them over to her. And you are the first I ever met. I pretended to be your friend and asked you to tea, and all the time I've been meaning to wait till you were asleep and then go tell her. Oh, but you won't, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. You won't, will you? Indeed, you really mustn't. And if I don't, said he, beginning to cry again, she's sure to find out. And she'll have my tail cut off, and my horns sawn off, and my beard plucked out, and she'll wave her wand over my beautiful cloven hoofs and turn them into horrid solid hoof like a wretched horse's. And if she's extra special angry with me, she'll turn me into stone. And I shall only be a statue of a faun in her horrible house until the 4 thrones at Carparavel are filled, and goodness knows when that'll happen, or whether it'll ever happen at all. I'm very sorry, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. But please, let me go home. Of course I will, said the Faun. Of course I've got to, I see that now. I hadn't known what humans were like before I met you. Of course I can't give you up to the White Witch, not now that I know you. But we must be off at once. I'll see you back to the Lampost. I suppose you can find your way from there back to spare room and wardrobe. I sure can, I'm sure I can, said Lucy. We must go quietly as we can, said Mr. Tumnus. The whole wood is full of her spies. Even some of the trees are on her side. They both got up and left the tea things on the table. Mr. Tumnus once more put up his umbrella and gave Lucy his arm, and they went out into the snow. The journey back was not at all like the journey to the Faun's cave. They stole along as quickly as they could without speaking a word, and Mr. Tumnus kept to the darkest places. Lucy was relieved when they reached the lamppost again. Do you know your way from here, daughter of Eve? Said Tumnus. Lucy looked very hard between the trees and could just see in the distance a patch of light that looked like daylight. Yes, she said, I can see the wardrobe. Then be off home as quick as you can, said the Faun. And can you ever forgive me for what I meant to do? Why, of course I can, said Lucy, shaking him heartily by the hand. And I do hope you won't get into dreadful trouble on my account. Farewell, daughter of Eve, said he. Perhaps I may keep the handkerchief. Rather, said Lucy, and then ran toward the far-off patch of daylight as quickly as her legs would carry her. And presently, instead of rough branches brushing past her, she felt coats, and instead of crunching snow under her feet, she felt wooden boards, and all at once she found herself jumping out of the wardrobe into the same empty room from which the whole adventure had started. She shut the wardrobe door tightly behind her and looked around, panting for breath. It was still raining, and she could hear the voices of the others in the passage. I'm here, she shouted. I'm here. I've come back. I'm all right. Chapter 3 will be Edmund and the Wardrobe. Yep, that's one of those really, really heavy scenes. I had a fun time doing Tumnus. I always have a fun time doing Tumnus. Tumnus is one of those characters that, you kind of just know him growing up as sort of this, he's one of the adults. He's not really like a super important figure. You're proud that he stood up for Lucy. There's going to be spoilers. He stands up for Lucy. He gets in trouble. He, gets saved, all that other kind of stuff. Like, all of these things are very important to his character. And, you appreciate him as a kid. I think you really appreciate him as an adult. Everything that he went through in this story and goes through in later stories, Horse and His Boy, that sort of a thing. Tumnus is one of those characters that I feel like gets overlooked a lot in the pantheon of incredible Narnia characters. And I almost wish Lewis was able to do more with him. But yeah, Tumnus is a really, really interesting look into someone who is actually being, just anybody who is essentially being set up as employed as a predator in this way is so evil to the core. And I love that we have a lesser magistrate, not elected, of course. He's, his own individual citizen, standing up to the tyrant, like right in the beginning of this whole series. And that becomes a very important thing later on as we go forward, and Lewis kind of discusses what makes a rightful king. These are all, of course, medieval concepts that he just weaves so geniusly into everything that he does. So, with that being said, it's the Bard Knox Life. We'll talk to you all very, very soon.